the original Stonewall space and how it was operated and what was legal and not legal. And
It was probably none of it was legal.
welcome to another episode of the Gay Barchives show, where we record gay history one bar at a time. Our guest today is Bob Gurecki, who has tons of stories to tell from New York City in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. Thanks for coming on the show, Bob.
Thank you for having me. I guess I should probably start out like at the beginning when I first came into the city. I'm from Jersey, and I grew up there. And I came into the city, I would say 1975. I was like half and half. I had a roommate, but I was still living in Jersey because I was working in Jersey. I had met somebody in the city. His name was Richie, and he came to see me at this bar Follies that I was working for in Jersey, and he told me he was opening a bar in the city and he would like to hire me as a bartender. Meanwhile, I mean, I didn't really know much what I was even doing at that point, but I came into the city and I went to this bar. It was called Cowboy and Cowgirl. It was on 53rd Street. That was at that time in the city. If you talked about hustlers, if you said 53rd and 3rd, everybody knew what you were talking about. That's where the hustlers were. I don't know there was another bar up there at the time, but so anyway, when I went there, I didn't know who Jimmy Murray was. Jimmy Murray had he was basically the owner of that bar. Richie, the guy that brought me in, was kind of a silent partner, and I was only one person that they brought in. So all these other people had worked for Jimmy before. I had no idea who Jimmy was. I mean, he came in and I was setting up the bar, and he said to me, I remember him saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm setting up the bar." He goes, "Well, you're not doing it right." And I said to him, "Who's going to work behind here, you or me?" And he says to me, "Listen to me. My way made millions. Just listen to me. You'll always have a job." And you know what? He was right. I stayed with him. Uh, I started at that bar. After about 3 months, he fired me. Um, my The guy that hired me, Richie, said to me, because he would stare at me constantly, wrong. We had tap beer. I would screw it up. And I came in to get my check, and he was there, and he said to me, "Do you want to go and work on Fire Island?" Because you could be a good bartender. He goes, "You just need to learn, how to tend bar." He goes, "I'll send you out to Fire Island." And he goes, "And if I ever open a disco in the city, you'd be the perfect bartender for it." He says, "I would hire you. You would have a job with me." So I went out to Fire Island in 1977 at the Ice Palace. I hated it. I hated every bit of it. They worked you to death out there. You didn't make a lot of money. The only busy night was really Saturday and Sunday tea. You worked from Thursday, you got out there and you worked right through until Tuesday, so pretty much on the weekend without a break. Um, like I said, the only way, at the time it was the Monster out there and it was the Ice Palace. The Monster bartenders there were making a lot of money because it was a smaller place and there was only two bartenders. So they were making money hand over fist there. So I found out when I was out there, I wasn't going to even last through the whole summer. And somebody told me Jimmy is building an ice palace in the city that he's going to open in the fall. So I remember he said that that he would hire me. So he came out there at one point, and I went up to him and I said, "Do I still have a job? I heard you're building the ice palace in the city." And he said to me, "Absolutely." He goes, "Just work till the end of the summer." He goes, when the place is ready, I'll call you." I came to him at the end of the summer and the place wasn't ready. And he said, "Go away. I'll call you when it's ready." So he called me sometime at the middle of December of 77, maybe the end of November. And he says, "I want you to go up and look at the place." It was on 57th Street and 6th Avenue, right off the corner. It was in a basement, and I went down And I remember thinking, I can't believe I waited all this time to work in this place. This place, a miracle couldn't fix it. The place had every obstacle in the world that it had. It had low ceilings. It was in a basement. It had columns throughout. The floor went from lower to higher. It was lumps all over the place. I couldn't see, I didn't know what they were going to do with this place, but I thought like I could do much better than this. So, when they're building bars and you go in and you even go 2 weeks or even a week before they're done, they don't look like they're going to come together. And then all of a sudden they do. So with the Ice Palace, this bar, they used every obstacle that they had and they used it as a positive thing. They used the low ceilings, they exposed all the air conditioning ducts, and they chrome plated them, which cost a fortune. They did levels to get away from the floors. They mirrored everything in black mirror and chrome. So the place looked like it went on for infinity because it wasn't that big. It was big enough, but it wasn't that big. The ceilings in the lounge, they did with a mylar and like a neon. And if you looked up, it looked like it went to infinity. So like, and then in the middle of the dance floor, they had a column and they covered it with neon and it shot through the ceiling, it shot up and through the ceiling like lightning. So it was amazing, just amazing what they did with the space. And they wound up getting a lighting design for Billboard magazine. And this was at the time of Studio 54. We won best lighting design 3 years in a row in Billboard magazine for lighting design in the club for the whole country. So it was the first gay club in New York, and I probably anywhere at that time in 1977 that there was any money put into. They were all like hole in a wall places that they opened, and there was really not a lot of money put into them. They used existing spaces and nothing was really, they never had a whole lighting system that they put in and a sound system. So we started out there, and at the time, he had bought another space on 57th Street between 11th and 12th Avenues. And he opened it as a roller rink. It lasted about 2 years. And then he came up to me one night and he says, I'm going to open another club. And he goes, it's the last thing I'm doing. And I'm going to take you with me. But don't tell anybody because I don't want the rest of the staff. I can't take the whole staff because the Ice Palace is still open. So when they were building it, he expected it to be a gay club. And the place was magnificent. It was going to be, the name at the beginning was going to be the Dove. Couldn't use the name because the restaurant in New York City at the time, very famous restaurant, was the sign of the dove. So he couldn't copyright that name. I think that was the reason. So he settled on, he said all the bars, the gay bars that had names of birds like the eagle and the other different ones, they did well. So he decided on the Red Parrot. So in 1980, I left the Ice Palace and I went to the Red Parrot. I was there bartending probably for I don't know, the first year or two, and then I was pushed up to management because I had at that time. He also he asked me one night, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I told him I want to own the place like you. And he goes to me, "What do you have to show for it?" Well, when we started at the Ice Palace, he said to the whole staff, I don't want you to steal from me. In return, what I will do, because people are going to get 2 tickets, drink tickets when they come in, a lot of people won't tip you. What I am going to do is for everybody that comes in, I will put $1 aside and you can split it at the end of the month. So this was 1977. And we were getting paid and we were getting tips and at the end of the first month, he gave us an envelope with almost $1,000. It was $960 in it, which was a ton of money at that time. And then it kept going up each month. And that was just for not taking anything from him. So I had saved all of mine. And so when he asked me what I wanted to do with myself and what I wanted to save, he said, "Well, what did you save?" And when I told him, he was very impressed, and he said to me, "I never would believe that you would have saved anything, because nobody else did." And he goes, "If you want, this is the last venture I'm doing. I'll take that money if you want to invest it with me." Well, when I asked him about it we were out that night and everybody was drinking. So the next day when I held him to it, he said to me, "I can't take your money. Um, it's like everything you have." He goes, "What if I lose it?" And I was 30 years old at the time. And I thought to myself, I'll never have a chance like this again. And if he had such a good track record. So I held him to it, and he said to me, and he always said to me, "My word is worth everything." So I said, "You gave me your word." He goes, "I did, didn't I?" And I have to talk to my lawyer. So he talked to the lawyer, and the place was going to cost, like, he says, it went way over budget. And what he did was he took the initial amount that it was going to be, and asked me, like, "Well, how much do you want? You want?" It would have been like, I don't know, like a certain amount for each point. And I thought, well, 1 point doesn't sound like much. And I said to him, "I'll take 2 points." Meanwhile, I didn't really have that money to give him for 2 points. But somehow I managed to scrape up that last bit of it, by borrowing. I did everything but steal, but I came up with the money and I had invested. So when he first opened, I owned like 2%. And I remember him saying when we opened, and he was showing me the lighting and the whole place when it just was done before we opened opening night. He says, "So what do you think?" And I said to him, I think, like, what do I own? The urinal in the bathroom? Because the place was so spectacular, and the little bit of my money was such a little bit of money compared to all that other money that was invested in it. It was like I thought, like, even if I was lucky, if I did own the urinal. So I was there until we had a good run there. We were at the time, the clubs, if you lasted 3 years, you had a good run. We
Right.
opened in
A lot of people don't realize that one of the clubs that, if you ask people to name a famous club in New York, a disco or whatever, a lot of people are going to name Studio 54. And that was only open for like 5.5 minutes. I mean, it
It
was
wasn't open, when it was open for years after, but that was after they were bleeding the name.
right.
That wasn't the original Studio 54. It opened in 77. It opened in April. It opened the same year as the Ice Palace did, and it didn't last long. It lasted a year and some months, I think, before they got raided and the whole thing came down. And then when the new owners came in, it just wasn't that. Once they even closed for their first renovation, I remember, going there. I've seen places like, that are people saying the gay night there was Sunday. It was Thursday, and that was the night we went. We went Thursday night. I think Sunday night they tried to do a gay night after the fact. Um, like after the people that couldn't get in, and now they were going to let in all the people that they didn't let in for the time that it was open. But Thursday night was the night, and I remember going there, and if I would go with a group, and we'd always get right in, and they would just pull us right in. I went by myself a couple of times, and they just ignored me. Um, I didn't want to say where I worked, because usually at that time in New York City, if you worked in another bar, everybody they just comped you. We just took care of each other. At the time, it was a different time. It was a different place. I mean, we kind of knew everybody that worked in the industry. And we always knew when the bartenders came in from that worked at another bar, that we were going to make a lot of money that night. We would always, and then we knew if we went out to another bar, it was going to cost us a lot of money that night, because we respected each other, like we knew we were, like, living on our tips. So so at the time when the Red Parrot did open, um, Jimmy Murray uh, wanted it to be. It was at the time when they were saying disco was kind of like fading out, and which it really never did. The dance music was always there, but it was at a time where he wanted to. we had a 20-piece orchestra at the Red Parrot. He was looking to go back to like the days, I guess, of the nightclubs, the famous nightclubs, and try to bring part of that back. And by doing that, he wanted a dress code. So we were like charging this was a night like 1980. We were charging $20 at the door to get in. That was a lot of money to come into a club. And he felt like that he wanted people, he didn't want any jeans or sneakers, and he wanted, and no like sweatsuits or nothing like that at the time. And so like we didn't get the gay crowd. We got some, but then the gay crowd, we went out like at that time we wore jeans and sneakers. That's what we wore. We didn't get dressed. So we never got the crowd. We did a little bit. He did a Sunday night there at the Red Parrot, but the club lasted for till 1987, till he sold it to the Copacabana, the famous Copacabana. When they took it over, they didn't use the name the Copa the first year. What they did was they called it Emerald City, and they made everything green. Why they would do that? I mean, we had bars that it was like plexiglass, the whole top of the bar, but they were lit from underneath, and they were like a rose color, so it made everybody kind of look good. All the down lights were like a pink or a rose, made everybody. They changed all the lights to green, which would make I have no idea who thought of this, but anyway, this place lasted for about a year, or maybe a little longer, the Emerald City, and then the Copa came in and moved from 60th Street and reopened as the Copa in that space, which was the Red Parrot.
Now the Red Parrot, like you said, it was around for about 8 years. It was on 57th Street. It was one of many contributions that Jimmy Mary made to the New York club scene in the 70s and 80s. But the space itself, I've looked into that a lot, and the space was pretty big, according to the information I found, and you can, confirm or deny this, but according to what I found, the occupancy of the bar was 3,200 people. So
That's
this is
wrong.
not a small space. Does that sound
That's
right?
wrong. That's wrong. I think the occupancy of the Saint was 3,200 people. I don't know if it was even 3,200 people is a lot of people.
It is.
We had the large at the time when we opened, or even after that, we had the largest occupancy legally in the city. We had a 2,000 people occupancy.
Okay.
The club went from 57th Street right through 58th Street. The reason we had that occupancy was because the whole front of the building was fire exits. The whole back was fire exit. The whole place, when he opened it, the ceiling was like a vaulted, like a ceiling, and it had all these trusses to hold the ceiling up. What he did, he had a contracting company come in, and he wanted to open up the space like really high ceilings and take out those trusses to hold it up. So what he had to do was he had to put these steel beams over the roof of the building on the outside and hold the ceiling up from the outside with these big steel beams across it.
Wow.
Now, we would get to a point like on Saturday night that we would get to around 1,800 people. We really couldn't hold our occupancy. When we got to about 8, we could, like the coat check, we couldn't hold it. I mean, we've had it, we did it in there, but when we would get to about 1,800, 1,900 people, we had to stop letting people in. It was too crowded, too uncomfortable. I mean, we even had the fire department come in on a Saturday night, and they wanted to empty the room. And I told them, I said, I could tell you how many people are within this room within 15 people. And they didn't believe me, of course, until I explained to them like that, how we had like systems put into place on top of systems of counting people in and out. We took into like account that people were going to sneak people in, the doormen were going to take payoffs and get somebody in for like $20 or something. But they counted the people, and we were right down to like they were amazed. And the inside was all done and pressed. The same, I think it's like pressed chrome or pressed stainless steel. what the Citibank building was made of. Place, all the walls were done with that, and they were like, there was all down lights around it, and it was all theatrical lighting. He didn't want any disco lighting. So it was, he brought in a lighting designer from Broadway, Ken Billington. He was a famous lighting designer that did Broadway shows, and he designed all the lighting there. Sam Lapata designed the room. He also designed the Ice Palace, and then later on he designed Stonewall, which was a big mistake. Well, get to that later, maybe. Um, and So we lasted there, but it was a straight club. It was no way. I mean, it was mixed a little bit, but it wasn't mixed like Studio was at one point. Or maybe even a lot of the other clubs. But it was mixed, but it was basically a straight club because of the dress code.
Now, the one thing I read about it, and I don't know, I'm sure this is probably true. There was a 10-foot neon parrot in the bar.
Oh, there was two net parrots. One was probably bigger than 10 feet. There was a neon one, and Joe Euler, which was he worked for Halston. He was the illustrator for Halston, and he was the one that designed the logo for the parrot. It was a parrot with a champagne glass, holding a champagne glass, and we had a huge neon parrot in the entrance holding the champagne glass. Well, after we closed, for the first renovation, we had one made. They made one, and it was just when fiber optics were coming out. This huge parrot, it was all fiber optics, and the lights just changed all colors as it went down. And they replaced that. They put that in the entrance, and then they moved the other one inside over the front bar. But there was a huge parrot. We had four scarlet macaws, live ones, big parrots. They were like, I would say, from head to the beginning of their tail, 2.5 feet. They were big. And there was two parrot cages in the back of the room where the lounge was and the bar. They were self-contained, soundproof. They had somebody that took care of them every day. The ASPCA would come in from time to time and would tell us they couldn't believe that these birds had such, because you really was, believe it or not, they had their own climate control. They had everything in there because they would have never allowed us to have live birds in a club with smoke and everything. I mean, there was still smoking in the clubs at that time.
Right.
So we had four scarlet macaws. They were. There was two in each cage on each side, and it was all glass enclosed. Like, and I said, they had their own. They had, their own temperature. Everything was, it was self-contained in there.
Now, you mentioned earlier that your little 2% contribution to the expense of the bar, to the ownership of the bar, might have gotten you to own one of the bathrooms. From what I've heard about the bathrooms, they were completely covered, floor, walls, ceiling, in black, glossy tiles about the size of nickels.
That's true.
Millions of individual tiles covering every square inch of the bathroom. That is
That's
true.
true. That's true. That's what the bathrooms were. They were all black, small little tiles, and mirror.
Yeah, those Mylar mirrors, the kind of.
Well, there was like the regular mirror, I think. I don't know if no, they weren't like that. They were just, regular mirrors in the bathroom. But I remember the bathrooms, and they were like exactly what you explained. They were small, like, nickel kind of tiles, black, shiny, and the ladies' room and the men's room. Those bathrooms, by the way, when the place was being built, uh, they didn't use a union, and from what I understand, is the union people came in with sledgehammers. I remember the whole bathrooms. They smashed every urinal. They smashed all the tiles on the wall. They smashed some other stuff in there that they were just being built. So all that stuff had to be replaced before we opened.
Now, I've also heard that the DJ booth there was massive, that you could put about 10 to 12 people in there, including a couple of DJs, a couple of lighting techs, some sound engineers, and guests. Is that true? Did it have a
Yeah,
really big?
the DJ booth was big because you had, I think, from what I remember, I think you had sometimes you had 2 to 3 people working lighting, and there was panels on each side, and then the other side, was the DJ, but it was a big open, like I would say maybe a square spot, and it was above the orchestra because there was a whole stage built below it for the orchestra. And then that was like all that stuff was like basically ripped out 6 months after we opened. He wanted to do a renovation. I remember going to Jimmy Murray and saying to him, we just opened. We weren't even open 6 months. We opened in, I think the opening night was New Year's Eve, with, I can't think of his name now. He was a famous impersonator from Las Vegas. He used his own voice. Uh, can't think of him anyway. But we closed and we closed for the summer because he figured it was going to be slow. And I said to him, what are you going to do? And he said to me, well, the carpet's got to be changed. The furniture's got to be changed. All the lights got to be taken down and dusted. So I said to him, Jimmy, people are going to come back in the fall. Nobody's going to notice you did nothing. This was one of the things that I learned from this man. And he turned around and said to me, you're right. Nobody will notice, but they'll notice if I don't do it. And he was, I mean, we would change the carpet in the Ice Palace, we changed the carpet after tea dance on Sunday. On Monday, they would come in and shampoo all the carpets every week, and whatever had to be changed. And like there was always mirror broke because the whole place was mirrored. And they would come in, and so everything, he was on top of everything, immediately. I mean, he didn't let anything wait. He figured if people were coming in there and paying $20 to get in, they deserve to walk on clean carpet and have a clean place.
So one other question I have about Red Parrot, because I've seen this in a couple of different places. You had mentioned that it was a roller rink before, and when he first opened it, and it was called High Rollers, I think was the name of it.
Correct.
At the Red Parrot, correct? It was called High Rollers
High
before.
roller.
But I read somewhere that there were 3 power operated kind of elevator go-go boy cages in the bar that would actually raise up and down. Is that true?
That's true. It wasn't the cages that were so spectacular because we didn't use them a lot. We thought we never really used them. We used them a couple of times for shows and stuff, but we used one that was in the corner of the dance floor. I think for the lighting guy used that, and he had a whole bunch of stuff on it. What was impressive was it was a catwalk going around the whole dance floor that was able to be built because of all this iron that was like steel on the outside holding that ceiling up. So they put a catwalk because they wanted to, like, they were copying the theater. So they put a catwalk all around the top of the dance floor. All the lighting was from that catwalk. There was also a stage up in the ceiling. So the dressing room was upstairs on the second floor in the front of the club. So when there was a show, the stage and the stairs would come down from the catwalk, and the stage would drop out of the ceiling. There was 4 chains on the sides of it. It was a big stage, would drop, and it would drop the same time as the stairs, and they would do like something like the 1812 Overture or like some 2001 Space Odyssey. The coming down of the stage was the most spectacular part of the show a lot of the times. It was amazing to see it. The people were like in awe just looking at the stage dropping out of the ceiling and the stairs coming down. And I remember there was 2 people, because we didn't allow people to come down on it because insurance reasons. But we had, on a Sunday night there, we had Grace Jones, and well, I don't want to go into like calling her what she was, but she was not the nicest person to get along with. She came in and she demanded that we pay her in cash before she was going to go on. And then she demanded that, and it's a Sunday night. You don't have that kind of cash there. I remember what we paid her. At the time, we paid her $25,000 on a Sunday. This was a lot of money at that time. And and then she wanted to come down on the stage. And she says otherwise she wasn't going to perform. And we had no choice but to like let her come down on the stage. And then she badmouthed at us for pretty much the rest of the show after she did perform. And then the other person was Patti LaBelle. And she came, we did a party for her there. And it was a birthday party. And we blocked off, we roped off the whole back of the club just for her and for her people. And we had special security there. What happened was somebody stole her pocketbook at the end of the night. And she came to the office, and we were mortified. We didn't even know what to say, because we felt like that we should have been watching this stuff there. So when she came to the office and she said the pocketbook was stolen, and we said how sorry we were, she said to me, "What are you sorry for?" She goes, "It was one of my people that stole it. It's not your fault." She goes, "I had money in that pocketbook to give you guys." And I said, "Give us for what?" We were doing this thing, comp. She goes, "What do you think the bartenders and the wait?" She was incredible. She says, "What do you think the bartenders, the waiters are going to get tipped by these ones that came into my party?" She goes, "These people want everything for free. They're not tipping anybody." So she had like all this money in there. And so what she did was, I don't remember if it was her, but she came back or sent somebody back. I think it was her, because I remember talking to her. She came back and she gave us money to split for the bartenders and the waiters. And she sent all the managers a dozen red roses, us all separately. And she goes, "If there's anything I could do, just let me know." And so I'm looking at her and she's looking at me and she says to me, "I know what you're going to ask me. And I can't do it, and I'll tell you why." And I said, "But you don't even know what I'm going to ask you." She goes, "Oh, yeah, I do." And she goes, "I know you're going to ask me to perform." She goes, "When I'm on performing in the area and I'm under contract, I cannot perform in my contract within a radius of like tri-state area. Um, and I'm always, performing somewhere." So she says, "What I'll do is, and if you want me to, I'll come in unannounced on a Saturday night or a night, and I'll come in unannounced." And I said, "That's fine with me." She held her word. She came in on a Saturday night and she wanted to be dropped with the stage. And we dropped the stage with her on it, and she did Over the Rainbow. And
Wow.
I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. The room just stopped, because a lot of she was like at the time not crossed over yet. So a lot, we had basically a room full of white males and females, and a lot of people didn't know who she was. They couldn't believe the voice. And I remember like the room just stopped, and she came in and came down on that stage. But that stage was it was the stage, and I guess the parrots were like, and also the floral arrangements that were done they would do the floral arrangements, and they would do them every week for about 3 days. And I think the cheapest one we would ever do at the time was maybe $5,000. It was incredible. I mean, I used to bring these flowers home. Have like a whole thing of flowers, because we would just throw them in the garbage on Saturday night. And because they were going to come in and do another one and the next week. But the place was a magnificent club. It was just, there was no place like it. We took all the business after 54, and it lasted through 1987, and then on after it was sold.
Very cool. Now, the one story that I really wanted to talk to you about, one thing that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, looking into gay history and stuff, is all these people are always talking about Stonewall, Stonewall, Stonewall. And yeah, Stonewall was a very important part of the gay rights movement and where we've come as a community over the decades. But what a lot of people don't realize, and you have a special insight into this, is that the Stonewall Inn, the place that was the home of the riots in 1969, was only a short-lived bar. I think it opened in 67 or 68. It was
Correct.
only open for a couple of years and it vanished. And for a long time, that space was not a gay bar. It was a Chinese restaurant. It was a bagel shop. It was a whole bunch of different businesses. And for a good while, it was vacant. But
Correct.
a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think that Stonewall has been in continuous operation since the 60s. And when they go to New York City to see the Stonewall, that they're seeing historic capture of what it was like 50 years ago. And we know that's not true because of all the different incarnations that have been in there. But in around 1990, you came in and you saw that the space was vacant and you decided you were going to open up a gay bar in that very same space that had been known 20 years earlier as Stonewall.
Not me. Not me personally. It was Jimmy Pisano who found the place. I was like, he was my best friend, by the way. Jimmy was. And what like when I started to tell you earlier, we had a business we had just opened down the street, was called the Beach. It was a tanning salon. The three of us were partners in it. So at the time, Jimmy was looking for a space for a bar. Michael was the other partner. Michael didn't want to know anything about a bar. But me and Jimmy were always going to do a bar together. Jimmy was looking for a space. So what happened was he came down to this tanning salon, which was on Christopher Street, and he said to me, "You're never going to believe I found a space on Christopher Street. We'll have two businesses on the same street." And he said to me, "You want to go look at it?" And I said, "Sure." And I walked, he goes, "It's only a block down." Didn't say anything about anything else. He just said a space. So when we walked down and I looked at it, I said to him, "Do you realize this is the original location of the Stonewall?" And he said to me, I think he knew, but he didn't mention it. It wasn't like that he mentioned it immediately, that it wasn't even important. So that's how he found that space. That space at that time was empty. There was nothing in, I don't, you got to remember the Stonewall when it first opened, the building, there's two stores in the building. There's two spaces, I should say, on street level in the building. The original Stonewall was both spaces.
Right.
When we looked at this space, the space that we found was actually the space that the original Stonewall where the dance floor was.
Okay.
Bar was on the other side of the original one. So when we went in, that space again was empty. So like then I said to Jimmy, I said, "So we're going to use the name, I guess." And he says, "No, we can't. I don't want to use the name because of the state liquor authority will give us a hard time," and which was bullshit. And he says, "I want to dedicate it to Jimmy Murray, which taught us everything," which was true. Jimmy Murray's one of his first bars was called New Jimmy's. So he says, "I want to dedicate it to Jimmy and call it New Jimmy's." But meanwhile, that's what his name was, Jimmy. So I
Right.
don't think it had anything to do with New Jimmy's. I think it had to do with his ego. It was the only he could kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
So we were just opening at the tanning salon, and I was like really busy there. I was there all day, so I didn't really want a lot to do with the bar. So I gave him some money, and I invested in it. And he went out and got Sam Lapata, which designed the Red Parrot, and that it was crazy that he would even think to get a designer to come in. I mean, what we could have done with that bar, you could have went in there, painted the walls black, put a bar in, and put coffee cans around the light bulbs, and called it a day. And he could have opened at that time. He wound up spending a fortune on putting in a kitchen, putting in uh, hiring a chef. They did murals on the wall that cost for one wall cost $10,000 to do these murals on the wall. The place was beautiful when he got done, but it had no nobody knew what it was. I mean, the place looked like I guess it looked like an English pub. That's exactly what it looked like. It looked like an old English pub. Everything was done to age. All these beautiful mirrors were put around. They were all aged. I have one in my living room still because when we did a renovation, we were going to throw them all out. And I said to my partner at the time, Dominic, I said, "What are you, crazy? These cost a lot of money." He goes, "Well, we don't want them anymore. Take it if you want it." So I have one of these mirrors, but everything was, all this money was spent in. So when we opened on opening night, people came in, and then after, when we were open, people would come in that hadn't seen it before and come down, and people were confused. They didn't know if it was a bar. Is this a bar? Is this a restaurant? You know, it just didn't fit a gay bar in the village with this name, New Jimmy's. So, and then people would say to me, "But this is the original location of Stonewall. What the fuck is wrong with you guys? You have like a original location history here, and you're not using the name. What are you, crazy?" So we went on for, I don't even think we went for a year. Um, and business was, I mean, we were like getting, I mean, I worked, I think, one day a week. I helped Jimmy out, and then Jimmy was basically running the place. Didn't pay anything. The bills were like, I mean, I didn't know it until after the fact. Um, it wasn't until after Jimmy got sick at that point. We opened in 1990. Uh, we ran the place until he got really sick in 94. He died in 94. And what happened was, the partner that the builder was never paid. Uh, Before Jimmy died, I made him go get a will, and I said, "You got to put that, because there's nobody here that if you die, the place will
Right.
be just left and it'll be closed." And you know how people are with wills, but we pushed him to go do it. So what he did was, he left me, Dominic D. Simone, which was the builder, his cousin Robert, but he left 5% to his partner at the time, Tom. But he left Tom with the control. So Tom was making all the decisions, all the control. So this was like in 94, like in March. What happened was, Tom was a really nice guy, by the way. If it wasn't for Tom came in and started paying all these back bills that we knew we had. We were going to have to almost close. I was still at the tanning salon, and somebody had come to me and asked me, "Do you have any investment in that bar still?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but they're robbing you blind, bartenders." So I went to Tom and I told him right before the 25th anniversary of Stonewall Gay Pride in 94, which was huge in New York,
Right.
much bigger than the 50th. It was every place that you could possibly rent for a venue was taken over, and there was parties all over the city. So I went to Tom and I said, "Tom, this person says that the bartenders are robbing you." And he said to me, and I said, "We got to put in spotters." We put in spotters, and they said they are robbing you. And it was the weekend of the 25th anniversary, and I went there, and I always would go and help out for Pride. And I said to Tom, "I'll be here for the weekend with you." And he said to me, he took the keys out of his pocket and he says, "Here's my keys. Take my 5%. I want nothing to do with this place." He was so taken. I mean, he was so hurt he was trying to keep this place in business for the people that were working there. And meanwhile, the people that were working there were robbing him blind. And he was taking his money from his personal money, putting it in to try to keep this place together. So now this is where the point I come in and Dominic comes in. So now we're left, it's me and Dominic, this builder, straight guy from Staten Island, knows nothing about bars business, knows nothing about the gay community. This straight guy from Staten Island, and we're like left, me and him together. We didn't really get along anyway, didn't care for each other, and here we are on the biggest holiday of the biggest gay thing that I could remember was that 25th anniversary. Anyway, we became really close. And all the things after that that we had to go through to keep that bar afloat. Because a year after that, the landlord had come to us and said to us he wants to make the whole building commercial. We only had the bottom floor. He wanted us to take the whole building. So Dominic, being that he was a builder, he goes, I'll rip everything out on the top floor. We'll put another bar up there. We'll put a small dance floor up there, and we'll open it up, and we'll have a club also, the Stonewall Bar and Club. I said to him, don't forget, this is in 1996. In New York City, there was very few cabaret licenses. A cabaret license only meant patron dancing. Didn't mean anything about shows. You could have shows as of right, but it meant patron dancing, and they were not going to give it out. So he was determined to get it. We went to the community board, and we went before them. And I mean, when I saw what was going before them, other businesses, and they were turning them down, I thought, I can't imagine what they're going to say when we go up there. So we got up there, and I remember the thing like it was yesterday. The woman, there was 4 people on at the table, I think 4 or 5 people, and they said 53 Restaurant Corporation doing business as Stonewall is applying for a cabaret license, and she said it like with a question mark. And then she looked at us, she pulled her glasses down and looked at me and looked at Dominic. A cabaret license. She goes, you got to be kidding me. She goes, is this correct? She goes, you must be kidding. And I thought, oh my God. So they turned us down. They said that we were going to bring like crowds to the village, and they had to do a study of the traffic. Meanwhile, you can't hold more than 74 people in the bar legally. That was our capacity. And upstairs was even less. So what happened was, because of Dominic, he was persistent of getting this. They told us if we want to pursue it any further, we would have to sue the city. So we went to court. We sued the city. We went to the Board of Standard and Appeals. And their answer was that the entrance to Stonewall was within 500 feet of a residence, and therefore they were not going to grant us a cabaret license. He still wasn't ready to give up. There was a storefront around the corner on 7th Avenue that was going out of business. It was an old newspaper store. And he came up with the idea that if we took over part of that space and broke through the back wall of Stonewall and put an entrance on 7th Avenue, we would be 500 feet from the residence. And I thought, that's crazy. It worked. We put that entrance in, we reapplied. They had to give it to us as of right, because so that's how we got the cabaret license. And so a lot of people, I think I have to give credit for all of that. I mean, I was there helping him, but it was him that pushed, Dominic DeSimone, that pushed and got all this stuff put together. And then we worked on opening that second floor, and I designed it with Marcia Stern. I think maybe you have some. She was a lighting person at the Red Parrot. She was a lighting person at on the island at the Ice Palace, in the city at the Ice Palace. So she designed the lighting at Stonewall, and she did a great job, because we had a lot of obstacles there. Again, it was a small space. There was low ceilings. You couldn't put any light from the ceilings. So she designed lighting there. It was great lighting, by the way. So we went to Stonewall until, I guess, it was 2006 when we closed. And we just couldn't, I mean, we were doing all right, but we could never get ahead. After 9/11, we never got back to, we were doing all right. And then after 9/11, all the businesses, when you're behind 1 month on your rent, it's hard enough to catch up. But once you get beyond that, you'll never catch up. I mean, it's almost impossible. So it became that we weren't going to catch up at that point. It was becoming more of a headache than it was anything else. I was working behind the bar. I wasn't even taking a salary. I had to work behind the bar during the day as a day bartender to make any money. So it got to the point where like enough was enough, and we decided to close in August of 2006. We closed in 2006 of August, and from what I understand, about 6 months later, it was closed then. And about 6 months later, the two guys that owned I don't know if they owned it, the two guys that were involved in the duplex came and got involved with the owner of the building, because if we couldn't pay the rent, then certainly nobody else was going to pay it either. So, because I was wondering how these guys going to pay it, but they got involved with the owner of the building and reopened as Stonewall. They just reopened the space. There was nothing in there. All they had to do was put a key in the door at that point. I guess they probably did changed a couple of things after, but at the beginning they just reopened the space as it was, because the space, we had done so many renovations in the space. Every couple of years we did a renovation. So being that I had a partner that was a builder, we were always doing renovations. So I don't know, maybe got questions for me.
Well, one thing I do want to ask you, because, again, as we started talking about this segment about the Stonewall, you said it had been vacant when you moved in. The side that you moved into originally was the dance floor side of the original Stonewall. So that would have been what, 51 Christopher Street?
53.
53. Okay. So
51 was next door. And there was an archway like in the middle, and that you could, the bar was at 51, and there was an archway that you could go through, and it was like in the middle of the building, and it was an archway. I guess it was open all the time because it looked like it was a permanent like archway that you could go through to 53, where we were.
now you also mentioned it had been, several incarnations. It was a bagel shop on one side. It was a Chinese restaurant on the other side. All kinds of different things. When you moved in 1990 to that space, how much of the original Stonewall decor even existed at that point? Was there anything left, or was it just?
Oh, there was nothing left. And then once we went in, whatever there was there before, the whole place, we gutted the whole place completely, right down to the brick wall. There was nothing, right down to the original brick walls that were there. So there was there would have been nothing left. There was nothing there to begin with. Don't forget the original Stonewall. I was there once when I was about God, I might have been about, I had to be only maybe 17, maybe I was 18. Somebody had brought me there, and it was like one of the first gay bars I went in. I was terrified, but I remember exactly what it looked like. I remember walking in and how the bar was against one wall, and I remember the opening that went to the dance floor on the other. Of course, I would have never even thought of dancing in those days. I mean, I remember the first time when I went into like the Round Table in New York. It was a dance club on 50th Street, and I remember going in there and seeing two guys dancing together, and I was completely freaked out because I'm not used to seeing anything like that. It
Right.
was so new to me that, and it was and I thought, and I would just stand against the wall into a corner kind of, but there was nothing left from the original. There was nothing there from the original. They probably had a cigarette machine in there. They probably had they probably didn't even get liquor through, like they probably went and got liquor. Who knows where they got it from?
Right. There's a lot of rumors about who is running the original Stonewall space, and how it was operated, and what was legal and not legal. And
It was probably none of it was legal. It was none of it was legal.
in fact, my understanding is that the official New York City police report justifying why there was a raid in at Stonewall in June of 1969 was because they were investigating the illegal sale and distribution of alcohol. That was their
Well, yeah,
official, claim.
absolutely, because there was no liquor license, so they were selling liquor without a license. They might have had some kind of flimsy cabaret license that they got for the night. How they got I don't know. I'm just like,
Right.
assuming that's what they did. But there was no liquor license. They would have never been able to get a liquor license for a gay bar. You didn't even use a homosexual bar in those days. You would have been closed down immediately. So they were running probably as what I know that clubs did after that, like the Anvil and places, they ran as private clubs, and they would give people drink tickets, so there was no money going over the bar, and they would get and I think they would have to apply daily. They would have to go downtown and get what they would call a not a cabaret license, like a banquet license, that they would be serving liquor just for an event for that day. That's how they would get around all these laws at the time. So there was so much illegal stuff going on that none of it was legal. So whatever the cops could have made up. They didn't have to make up anything. They could have went in there with any,
Right.
good reason. So whatever they said, they had every right to probably go in there.
So now here we are, fast forward 2023, and Stonewall is back in operation. A lot of people think it's the original Stonewall preserved in a capsule. We know that's not true. How do you feel about the fact that they have resurrected Stonewall, in its newest incarnation? Do you go there? Do you respect the project at all, or is it just, yeah, well, somebody's taking advantage of our history?
No, I don't think somebody's taking advantage. I think, you're in a business, and you're like, something like that, you're in a business to make money. It was nice, when I was there, of course, it was nice when I would, get interviewed, like, you get interviewed by, people from all over the world that would come in, especially around Pride. But basically, it's a business. What I see them doing now is, I don't know who's behind it. I was trying to find out, actually. The space next door, which was the original bar, has been empty, and so they've been like, have a sign in the window that they are going to make that into a visitor center. And I thought they were going to put some history in it. My What I wanted to do when I was there, because I felt like I owed it to the gay community, being what the space was, that I needed to like put some history there when people came in. And so I designed a whole wall. And it never got done what I wanted it to get, how I wanted it to be, because it always was like way over budget. And when it came to doing it, it was like they wanted $10,000 to do this wall. But what I wanted to do was, and what I eventually did, but it wasn't what the wall I wanted it to be. I did like 4 panels. I did 1969, the time of the riots, what was going around, the history before, pictures before, anything that I could find. I mean, I went to the library and I had to dig through archives and boxes looking for anything I could find, pictures of the outside of the building. I did that first panel. Then the second panel was the 80s, what the gay community went through in the 80s, the whole thing with the quilt and everything, what we went through with AIDS. Some of that I didn't want to bring it down, but that was our history, and I thought it deserved to be there. Then I was up to, so we were in the 90s, then I was up to the 90s. But I had like 4 panels, and I did it. So I did a lot of that history on the wall. I think when I walked out of there the night before we closed, I took some of the plaques. I don't even know. I guess I got them someplace. But I think if they do this thing next door, I don't know who's involved. I know the landlord did not give that space up. He owns the building, and I know and else he got awful generous in his older years, because when we were there, if we were didn't pay the rent, he didn't care. He would have closed the place. So I don't know who's involved in this visitor center. If it's the city is being funded, I would think it looks like to me it's being funded by something in the city, or by the center, maybe they're getting funding, but I don't know. I actually wanted to go into the bar. I was in the village last week and asked them in Stonewall, who's behind this? but I thought like maybe I would sound kind of pushy and like they're asking me, who the hell are you? Um, but I don't go into the bar. I don't drink anymore, so I would have no business going in there anyway. And even if I did drink, I probably wouldn't go in.
I'm going to
I
check.
walked a couple of times.
There's a guy that you may know of in the village. His name is Michael Venturiello, and he has a business there called Christopher Street Tours. And he actually does some gay history tours in the village about, some of the different bars and venues and what the gay history was in that area. He might be somebody who would have his, finger on the pulse of what's going on with this new project that you're talking about
Yeah,
attempting
he
to.
would know. And maybe, I don't know if like I went and just asked the bartender in there because sometimes th people they don't know anything. You
Right.
ask them, they look at you like you're crazy or something. But I thought they were supposed to open this year, and now they had like a paper sign in the window, and now it's all neon telling them about this visitor center is going to open. So I don't know actually what's going to be in it. But if they could do something like what I started to do with the history, I think that's what should be in that space. That space should be probably at some point. I think maybe after even we left, that space should have the gay community should have taken over that space and used it as an archives and history and did a museum there.
Well, very cool. We'll look forward to seeing what's happening there. And I appreciate the fact that you actually played a part in that history of the Stonewall space and that you're here to tell us about it because a lot of that, gets mixed up in the sauce. A lot of people don't know what happened between 1969 and now. So I'm glad you're around to do that. One other final note I wanted to bring up with you is that when you first walked in to the Ice Palace on Fire Island, did you have any clue that all these years later, 50 plus years later, it would still be operating there as the main club on Fire Island?
No clue at all. I mean, I didn't really know what Fire Island even was. I mean, I had gone once or twice. Somebody had brought me, and I knew it was like this big gay mecca. Uh, no, you don't, God, who would have known that I would have owned the Stonewall and got to there and you're thinking of something like that. But when I was out there, when I got done working out there that summer, I remember saying to my boyfriend at the time, um, I said, if I never see that island again, it'll be too soon. I hated it. I didn't want to go back. This is how much people they would go, everybody would come down from the Pines on Saturday night because there was nothing in the Pines at the time. The pavilion hadn't been built yet, so they would come down on the beach and water taxis and everything, and come down. And these guys would invite me to these parties up in the Pines. And my mind, I thought that they were inviting me only because they knew I couldn't come because I was always working. I didn't do anything but work out there, and I didn't come back with making a lot of money, even though I saved mostly everything I made. What I did come back was because of working out there, is because of everything that followed after that. Going to the Ice Palace, then Jimmy taking me from the Ice Palace into the Red Parrot, and then meeting these people at the Red Parrot that I opened two other businesses with. And That's my life is because of that going out there. And when I first told my partner that I was going to go out there, I said, they asked me to go work on Fire Island, and he said to me, absolutely not. And I said, oh really? So the next day I went back and I said, when do I go out? Because nobody was going to tell me what to do and that I couldn't do something. So once he said that, that was sealed that I was going. That was the worst thing he could have said. If he knew how to like work me, he would have said something other than that. But that's how I never no, I never did think of anything. I didn't like it. I hated it out there. It was cold most of the time, and then when it wasn't cold, it was so hot. There was no air condition. There was no air condition in the house that we had to rent. Um, it wasn't a good summer. I mean, you didn't make any money. They didn't pay you anything. We got paid $6 a shift and $14 to work Saturday night because we were working so many hours. That was it.
Wow. Now, there's one bar that opened up trying to be a competitor for Ice Palace on Fire Island. Opened up for a minute, had a great success in Florida, but never made it in Fire Island and burned down after one season. Did you ever experience the Copa on Fire Island?
Oh, it's funny that the Copa was it was there so it was like a flash that and then it went in a flash. But I never was in it. Copa was the original Sea Shack, which Jimmy Murray owned. It was a restaurant on the ocean on that property. That property, from the Sea Shack where the Copa was, right through the Ice Palace to the bay, Jimmy Murray owned all of that property. And I never went into the Copa. I don't remember. When I said to you I didn't want to go back to the island for 5 years, I don't think I went back until I was maybe almost 5 years, and I didn't start going back. And then I came back and I went back to the Pines. I didn't go to the Grove. I had a sour like just feeling about the Grove, and really about whole Fire Island, about working there. I
Well,
didn't
I'm
experience all the other good stuff that everybody else did.
Well, I'm glad you had a chance to share some of your stories with us about the two Ice Palace locations, about the Red Parrot, about New Jimmy's, which I believe at one time was also called New Jimmy's at Stonewall Place
Oh,
before it.
that was it. It was New Jimmy's at Stonewall Place.
So it had a little bit of a nod to Stonewall history there, and then of course it reverted to the name Stonewall. But we appreciate getting that information, being able to tell the story a little bit more completely with, a first person account, and the fact that you can tell us a little bit about Jimmy Murray and his contribution both on the Fire Island and in Manhattan. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And we look forward to maybe talking to you again about some more of your stories from the past.
Well, thank you for having